And now back to the show. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Khalees Smith. Later in the show, we'll sit with rising musician Caroline Rose.
She's got a residency at Bombyx coming up. 2 days where you can catch her with an ensemble playing her latest album, and we'll hear all about her artistic journey in a few.
But first, a conjunction of things that could not be more like Mr. Universe Hampshire College's Salman Hameed.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Time for some kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, Mr. Universe at your Amherst kitchen table. We've got a bunch of topics to get to today. We'll start with a place we often start. Even last week, we spent the whole show talking about Dune. We're going back to the movies because the Oscars was last night. What was your take on the Oscars?
Loved it. By the way, we were one of those people who didn't realize that they were starting an hour early.
Not just because of daylight savings time, just because of television.
So we were looking for the red carpet. So we did miss that. But we were like, oh, it's starting. No, I thought they were fun. Actually, the jokes were actually funny.
Yeah.
Most of them. For example, John Cena.
Naked John Cena was funny.
What's going on? You're supposed to run across the stage.
I changed my mind. I don't want to do the streaker bit anymore.
Yeah, and the movies that won, the year for the movies last year was amazing. And so watching these movies nominated, the best actor, actress, supporting actor, I mean, those were just such amazing roles that people had played. So it was a lot of fun.
I felt like Lily Gladstone got robbed. I wanted her to win for Best Actor. She was great. Not that there was anything wrong with Emma Stone's performance. It was also great. Tough category. I wanted there to be a little bit of history made there, apart from just like Wes Anderson winning his first Oscar for the short feature, which was fun. Cute short feature. I like that one.
Emma Stone is amazing. Anything that she is in, including a really weird recent TV show, if you want to go on a trip, you can see The Curse. So she is really good, but I completely agree. Like, Lily Gladstone's performance was incredible, much more subtle. Mm-hmm. Emma Stone's was like, high volume performance. I actually thought it wasn't expected to win, but Carey Mulligan in Maestro, I thought she was also really nice, subtle performances. So
any of them would have been deserving.
And I really like the bit that with all the 5 previous winners came in to introduce, because that allowed all the actors who had been nominated to be recognized. I thought that was nice.
And they were praised by other Oscar winners, and it was very touching. I was like surprised. I was getting all emotional hearing them say these nice things about their career. I also have to say, I was not rooting for I'm Just Ken to win the Oscar. I was rooting for Billie Eilish, and she won. But the performance of I'm Just Ken, the whole time I was watching it, I was like, the Oscars is going to win an Emmy because this is such an amazing performance.
I'm just Ken, anywhere else I'd be told. Is it my destiny to live a life of longevity?
Yeah, and that was so emotional. That's where I was so teary-eyed in there.
I'll also shout out my friend and filmmaker, the guy who wrote and directed The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot with Sam Elliott, filmed in Turner's Falls. We go over his house every Oscar night. They just had a new baby, him and his wife Jackie. Shout out to little Milo Fox. My son Enzo cleans all of our clocks about Oscar predictions. He got 19 out of 23 correct. Bob only got 17 out of 23 correct, and I only got 12.
Enzo is actually doing a good job.
I'm going to send him to Vegas with those kind of odds. All right, well, so those stars aside with the Oscars last night, it's also Ramadan, which is something that you grew up celebrating, I guess, observing in Pakistan and beyond, and here in the United States. And there's an astronomical element to Ramadan.
Ramadan starts, or Ramzan, depends upon where you're from. It started today, or last night. That is tied to astronomy because it starts with the sighting of the new moon, or the new crescent. And I should use quotes because sighting, and so there is this issue which happens with all religions in some sense, that when modernity comes in, or changes comes in technology, there is a debate about, well, how do you determine, for example, what does a new moon or the new starting of the new month means? And here in this case, there is a debate about whether you use calculations, which can tell you when the astronomical new moon is. An astronomical new moon is when you don't see the moon at all. So the crescent, which you see it's a symbol of Islam, and you see it on a lot of the flags of Muslim countries. Well, that is the new crescent. That's not astronomical new moon, but that's the moon that you can start seeing after the astronomical new moon. Mm-hmm. And the debate is whether you should see it, or somebody should see it with their naked eye or not. And that's another thing. Should you see it with a naked eye? Should you see it with a binocular, telescopes? Up in the plane from the International Space Station, from the moon, right? So all of those questions, and of course from the moon, it really raises
We're on the moon. Of course we can see the moon.
really interesting interpretation issues. So that is a debate, sometimes very heated, and partly it depends upon how you look at it. For some, the fact that you will not know if it's based upon somebody seeing it, and actually it requires two people to actually see it. They say, hey, yeah, I really swear I saw that. And that introduces a lot of uncertainty. And so starting of the Ramadan is still, okay, well, you're going to fast the next day or not, if you are fasting. But it gets a little bit more tricky for the end of Ramadan, which is the celebrations, Eid, because whether you are going to take the day off the next day or not, whether kids are taking off from school or not, and you cannot know.
Because they have to wait till it's the fullest of full moons before you decide, or what?
No,
the newest of
the
new moons.
newest
The
of new moons.
the totally gone moon.
And it has to be observed. Somebody has to see it. So the moon, the days may be 29 or 30. So that's where it comes in. So if it's not
2 days off.
If it's not on the 29th, then of course, 30th is the fine. But the question is whether it's on the 29th or not for the lunar month. And so there is this excitement in that sense. And sometimes it's interesting from astronomical perspective. Of course, you can calculate astronomical new moon for tens of thousands of years. So the question is, why not use this? So some people do. Some people use, well, after the astronomical new moon, meaning to say when you don't see the moon at all, you can figure out about 14 to 15 hours after it, you can potentially see with the naked eye. So you can just use those calculations. Some people say, aha, but that's not what was done in early Islam in the 6th and 7th century. And so you should not do that. And so there is a debate about that. I personally think these are some of the things that religions go through, things modify. A parallel would be there are a lot of things in other religions, including Orthodox Jews or Jewish traditions as well, in terms of use of technology and things like that, but people adapt. In Islam as well, there was a fascinating issue on the use of loudspeakers for prayers because they thought that, well, it is being mediated, so it's not directly coming through you. After a while, it gets actually normalized.
Yeah. Nobody warned me about the loudspeakers the first time I was in Calcutta, and I was woken up from a nap while the call to prayer was blasting through the city. I was like, what on earth is that?
So this is just one of those things which I also think that in 10, 15, maybe 30 years, this is also going to get resolved because calculations make a lot of sense. But we are in it. Since I study science and society and these type of issues, how culture and society deals with these messy issues, it's fascinating. And just as an additional point to that, I just got an email this morning from somebody in California who was asking about the possibility of Saudi Arabia seeing the moon yesterday. So in Saudi Arabia, Ramadan is also starting today. And the question was, but the moon, could they have possibly seen it? And the answer is no.
Because of science and calculations.
Yeah, because the moon was too young to have been seen by anybody in Saudi Arabia.
But they were trying to get an early jump on Ramadan.
Yeah, so that also happens, especially...
That's what happens. Before you know it, there'll be Ramadan decorations right after Halloween.
And so that actually does take place sometimes. But does it matter? I mean, so that's another thing. I mean, from scientifically, you go like, wow, it doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, this uncertainty, sometimes there is a beauty to it, because in this world where everything is so mechanized, so everything is determined so much by very specific times, it is kind of nice sometimes to have this uncertainty. It's like I've stopped using sometimes when you're going to have the address, you're going somewhere for driving and you go like, you're not going to use those directions that tell you. You're just going to figure it out. And is it messy? Sure. Do people in the car get mad? Sure. But I think, sometimes it's nice. But at the same time, I should mention that, of course, conditions in Gaza, those are beyond horrific, and Ramadan is also part of their thing as well over there. And the Oscars, if we can connect the two together, there wasn't much mention of political speeches in that sense. There was about Mariupol for Ukraine, and I was actually really glad to see the director, Jonathan Glazer, who won for sound, and he also won, I think, one other award.
Foreign film, maybe?
Foreign film, I think, for Zone of Interest. And he made actually a speech. Zone of Interest is about really interesting film because it's set in a place right next to, or a house that is right next to Auschwitz. And it's about how people can go through, how easy, let's put it this way, how easy it is to go through when you actually know what is happening right next to you. And I think in a globalized world, in some ways, a similar thing is happening, that we actually do know the kind of hunger, the kind of killings, the kind of stuff that people are going through in Gaza, but yet we are also going through our lives. And I'm not excluding myself from that, because I'm also part of that. Yeah, I mean, we watch the Oscars and so forth. Nevertheless, so that movie just gives you a sense of how it might be possible at the time of the Holocaust. And I think the parallel is, which Jonathan Glazer actually mentioned, and how it might be possible today. And so Ramadan is in Gaza as well. I should also give out a shout out to, I live in Amherst, and so Amherst Town Council passed the ceasefire resolution, and we were there to support it as well before that. And yeah, I mean, call for ceasefire should not be controversial, and yet sometimes it is. And so it's just a reminder. Spirituality or religion in that sense, I mean, it gives you something to hold on to, and I think that's in a positive sense. But that's what's going on over there. So while we think about all of these other things, I just wanted to mention Ramadan in Gaza as well.
Coming up, more with Mr. Universe. We'll put the Oscars and Ramadan aside and talk some actual astronomy and hear about Supernova 1987 and its missing neutron star. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
I just brought this together from my childhood. This was something. So here is. I'm holding.
You made?
Well, so this was 1989. This is a sort of a printed copy of a symposium we did in Pakistan about Supernova 1987A.
Wow!
And I had started an astronomy society over there, and we had talks about what happened at the supernova, partly because it was unexpected. The kind of star that exploded was a blue supergiant, which was unexpected because at that time, people used to think that only red supergiants go. So 2 years after 1987, so in 1989, in Pakistan, we actually organized a seminar on what we know about supernovae in general, what do we know about supernova 1987A, and I was actually all of us, the people who actually wrote it and did that, we were all in high school, and a lot of fun. So I have very fond personal memories of this supernova.
Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed. Should we do one little bit of actual astronomy before we say farewell?
Yes, and it is connected to stars, because
Not the Oscar stars.
Not the Oscar stars. We are talking a little bit about science. We're talking about moon sighting and other things. And sometimes people think that, well, scientists don't know. One day they say one thing, one day they say another. But I actually find joy in those stories that appear to be that exciting. Look at the way science has progressed, and the way our predictions go, and the way scientists are careful in making claims. All of that comes together about a supernova. So that happened in 1987.
Meaning we witnessed it in 1987, but it happened millions of years before that.
No,
Really?
this was actually pretty close to us. This was the closest supernova that humans had observed with the naked eye. The one before that was in 1604. I think that was Johannes Kepler, who could see it with the naked eye, but telescopes had not been invented. A few years later, there were telescopes, rudimentary ones, but a few years later. So this was the closest supernova that humans saw. It was in a large Magellanic Cloud, so you can see it from the southern hemisphere, about 160,000 light years away.
So 160,000 years ago.
That is correct.
Supernova.
That is correct. And I distinctly remember, because this was my height of when I was really interested, I was in high school. And so I remember that because it was such a big deal. I remember the small details as well, because the person who first saw that, because when a supernova happens, especially like this, you see a new star. Supernova, so nova means guest. And supernova is like really big guest, super guest. And you suddenly see a star appear, if you can see it with the naked eye, at a place where there wasn't a star. Because a star exploded, and for a brief period of time, for a few weeks to a month, it would outshine the entire galaxy, the brightness of billions of stars. And that's what happened in this particular case also. But I just remember when in 1987, when this supernova happened, he was a telescope operator, Ian Shelton, and he did not get a PhD. I think at that time he had masters. And the story, the mythology that went was like he was listening to Pink Floyd, "We don't need no education." Right? And that's when he went out, like, and he saw, he's like, "Hey, wait a minute, what's that?" And that was supernova. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, when a star goes supernova, so those are, our sun is never going to go supernova because it's not big enough. For stars that are 8 times or 10 times big, more massive than our sun, they die in this spectacular fashion, which is called supernova. If you are too big, 20 times more massive than the sun, then you are actually not left with anything in the middle. You're left with a black hole. You are left with something, but that you're left with a black hole. But between 10 and 20 times more massive than the sun, then when you are left with is a small little core, which is the size of a city, New York City or something like that. And that is called a neutron star. And we know that because there is this other spectacular supernova that pretty much everybody across the world had seen it in 1054. That we know now is the Crab Nebula, which you can actually see, with a small telescope these days at nighttime as well. It's in the constellation of Taurus. And in the middle of it, there is this spinning neutron star, again, the size of a city, about 10 miles or so across. And it is spinning, the Crab one, 33 times per second.
Wow.
And its density, it's like, even a teaspoon would be about 1 billion tons. So it's a very strange object, but that is what is left over because the density is so high that it is the density of the nucleus of an atom.
Wow.
And so it's amazing. So the question was, in 1987, we saw that there was a supernova, and astronomers have been closely looking at it for all this time, for 35, 36 years. And the question was, there should be a neutron star in the middle. Mm-hmm. Or there should be this spinning thing, which is called a pulsar. Where is it? And up until now, there had been some indications, but no clear-cut evidence of that. But they were like, all of the science says, there are also these particles called neutrinos that came out of it when it happened, and there is a prediction that certainly tells you that it should be a neutron star in there, not a black hole, a neutron star. And the neutron star is there because all of the physics tells you. But where is it? So James Webb Space Telescope, it started working in July 2022. And one of the first targets it looked at was supernova 1987A. And now some of the results have come out which suggests that there are these detections of elements called argon, for example, so it's ionized argon, meaning to say some of its electrons have been stripped out, and some sulfur, where also some of the electrons have been stripped out. But the amount of stripped electrons and the amount of argon and the amount of stripped electrons and the amount of sulfur, it matches perfectly with the presence of a neutron star.
But they still can't see it with James Webb?
Not yet. And so this is what I wanted to say. Hey, it looks pretty boring, but look at how systematically it's going, and there have been hints before as well, but scientists don't say, it's my theory, it's definitely true. No. So we still cannot see it. And another thing I should mention is that oftentimes people talk about the scales in astronomy goes in billions of years or millions of years, and things don't change. But look, here we are talking about something that happened 35 years ago, and I should mention, I could have impressed you, but I cheated. I looked at it, that the Academy Award for Best Film in 1987 was Platoon. So we can actually see, so it wasn't that far back, and already how much has changed. And as the gases, basically the star exploded and the gases are still expanding. And so as they expand, changes keep on happening. So Crab happened about 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago. Here, supernova 1987A, we are witnessing those changes happen on the scale of years, and initially on the scale of days, now on the scale of years and decades. And hopefully, the reason why we cannot see the neutron star is because there is so much stuff in the middle, and James Webb Space Telescope can see through some of it, but still we cannot see that neutron star. We know it's there because the way it's light, it's radiation, but we are still not there yet. But it's such a cool prediction. There's a systematic ways why we think that is the case. And the same thing goes, okay, and then when you find something, you have to be cautious of not overstating your results. Unlike, for example, some people claim about the comet being from an alien spacecraft and things like that. Some people make those kind of claims, and that is a contrast to this of what good science is.
In some ways, this missing neutron star is like Lily Gladstone. Maybe we didn't know about her and her career until just this year because of Killers of the Flower Moon or her work on Reservation Dogs, even though she's been working in film and before. But she's at the beginning. We're going to watch her star expand, and soon will shine and capture that elusive Oscar.
Coming up, Caroline Rose. She'll have a 2-day residency at Bombyx in Florence in April, and we'll hear about her new album, her visual video, and her grandmother.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Singer-songwriter Caroline Rose joins us. Caroline Rose will have a 2-night residency with the Metropolis Ensemble Tuesday and Wednesday, April 2nd and 3rd at the Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence. Their latest album is last year's The Art of Forgetting, which was nominated for a Grammy in one of the most underappreciated categories, I believe, but the most fun to say, Best Recording Package. Did you go to the Grammys, Caroline Rose?
Yeah, I did.
Tell us about what it was like, your experience going to the Grammys.
It was honestly so bizarre. I don't normally go to things like this, like big fancy events. I'm not really a fancy person. I'm more of like a wear dirty jeans type person. But my mom really wanted to go. Yeah, she pretty much bought her flight out here before she even knew that she could come to the event. So I was like, all right, we gotta go. It's gonna be fun. But it was really a lot. There's so many people there. There's so many categories. The day is really long. It's also in an arena, so it's not really in an easily accessible place where you can just like go get a sandwich real quick. Everything's really far away. It was torrentially raining, like a biblical rain. We tried to get some food, and there was just construction everywhere, so it was so hard to get anywhere. And by the time like the second part of the Grammys was starting, my mom and I still hadn't even taken our picture on the red carpet. So we were like, all right, let's just go take it really quick. And then we're going to miss like the first part of the show, but there's probably not going to be anybody there because the show will have started already. So we go out there thinking like no one's going to be on the red carpet. They're going to be wrapping up. We get there, literally every famous person you can think of is there. Like it was both like a very interesting like anthropological study watching this, because it is just so out of my world. I mean, you're talking about people who have been working in the entertainment industry since they were 10, and they're everywhere. Taylor Swift walks by with just like a whole entourage of people. I'm just like, whoa, there's so many cameras. Just trying to be calm. And my mom is so excited. She's like, oh my God, Lenny Kravitz, Janelle Monáe. Like, she's taking secret pictures of everyone. I'm like, oh my God. Not to mention, my mom took it upon herself to have a screen printed shirt with the album cover on it. So I'm walking around with my mom, who's like a walking advertisement for my album. I'm like, this is so embarrassing, man. But she was so cute. I just couldn't tell her no. She was just so sweet. And
it just goes to show you how proud she is, because that's what you were nominated for, the album cover, essentially, right? Best recording package. That's what that means. So that's cool.
And what's inside of it?
Yeah.
Like that's wonderful.
And when what's inside of it is your mom, you win the Grammy even if you don't win the Grammy.
I know, yeah. It was just truly a hilarious experience going up there and being like, hey, like, can we just get our picture taken really quick? And they're like, yeah, just stand in this line. And we're standing behind like Kelly Clarkson, Ice Spice, Lana Del Rey, and
nice.
You hear all the cameras clicking for all these like mega famous stars. And then we get up there, and then they're just like, and who are you again? I'm just like, This is so bizarre.
And the you that we're talking to is Caroline Rose, who's going to be at Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence.
I'm genuinely surprised that this is your first nomination because your albums have been so good. I got to see you at the Here and There festival at Mass Mocha. You were subbing in for Men I Trust, who all got COVID, and they brought you back out. And it was right when you were working on the material for this particular album. How do you feel about what you were doing there, like the baby instances of those songs to where you finally got?
I think it's really good to test out the material on audiences because you just never know how it's going to go until you actually perform them for people. I'm always surprised by what people gravitate towards because sometimes it's not what I would gravitate towards. I take like little micro notes where I'll be like, oh, this part really hit. And like this part might not be as strong as I thought it was. So doing those solo sets are actually extremely helpful for me. And I don't know how much the songs changed. They probably would have been tweaked here and there a little bit because usually what I'll do is write 5 different versions of the song because I'm like, I'm actually kind of feeling this way today about it. And then, then I end up going back to the original version in the end because I'm like, there's nothing really that wrong with it.
So lesson to everybody, just keep your demos.
Definitely.
And keep your voicemails, too, which is another thing that shows up on this new album, The Art of Forgetting. It's super touching because there's these interstitial songs where you're playing these voicemails from your grandmother.
Caroline, I just wanted to say hi and just hear your voice. I love you so much, and I think about you every day, and I hope everything's going good with you. You let me hear from you when you have a chance. Bye.
Can you talk about why you wanted to do that and holding on to those voicemails and what they mean to you now that they're part of your now Grammy-nominated album with your Grammy on it?
You're better than gold.
Yeah. I had this idea to do a project with all these voicemails because I had collected them over years. But my grandma would call me, and I had these little documents of her basically aging up until the time that she died. And it'd be these little clips, and she'd almost say the exact same thing every single time. It would usually be something like, "Hi, Caroline, just been thinking about you. It's me, Ma," like as if I didn't know who she was. And over time, you'd start to hear her losing her memory. Like she would dial and then forget that she called, and then she'd dial again, or she would forget to hang up, and so you'd hear her having these little conversations in the background. The whole time I was kind of going through this really difficult period where I was just, if someone had handed me a pill to be able to forget everything that was painful, I would have taken it. And so I just really wanted an easy out from all these hard things that I was going through. Meanwhile, my grandma was losing her memory and like losing her mind, and would have loved nothing more than to remember every single moment and just be present with us and be able to come to dinner with us and have a conversation with us. And I just thought it was a really interesting kind of combination of things, like what we were both experiencing and how much of a rock she was to me at that time, because even if I was like too depressed to even pick up the phone, I would know that she was there, like she cared, and she would call me every day, and we would talk pretty much every day of that time, and it became a sort of stabilizing source in my life that was just like, oh, I have people that really love me, even when I can't love myself, like or I've forgotten how. Like I know people love me, and like I know I'm gonna be fine.
Caroline, I just want to say hi. I think about you so much. Wish I could see you, and I love you, honey. Bye.
What does it feel like when you hear your grandmother's voice still alive in those voicemails, even in the context of your album? I mean, I spent a lot of time recording my grandmother right before she died, and those are some of the most treasured recordings that I have.
Grandkids? Yeah. It's almost like your own, you love them too. I love my grandchildren. I love you.
Yeah, they're pretty valuable. It definitely makes me emotional listening to them. And she died like right after the album came out. So it was this weird relic. Sort of ended up honoring her because she really did help me get through probably the most difficult time of my life. I don't know. It was like a weird way to honor her and also have these little like little movie scores to her voicemails that I think are really special, and it kind of like lightens those moments on the album really lighten the mood. And that was another point of like putting them in there. I was like, she was such a source of joy to me. She was a real rock in our family. It's still the way that we talk about her is as though she's still alive almost.
Wow.
She was a force. She was a big force in our family.
That doesn't change. I still miss my grandma.
Yeah.
Actually, like those points in your album bring me really close to tears because I have a really strong relationship with my grandmother too, and we have recordings of her. So every time I hear yours, it just sort of makes me well up. And I'm doing it now. I can't ask questions. Thanks, Monty. Now I'm crying.
Sorry.
That's real. I feel you.
You are the best one.
Coming up, more with Caroline Rose, who'll have a musical residency at Bombyx in Florence next month. We'll hear about her visual video for The Art of Forgetting.
And don't you be forgetting NEPM.org or 800-639-8850 to make a contribution now. You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Woke up on the hour when she came out of the shower.
We're speaking with Caroline Rose, who'll have a 2-night residency with the Metropolis Ensemble Tuesday and Wednesday, April 2nd and 3rd at Bombyx in Florence. And you've mentioned a couple times of how this album wrestles with you going through one of the toughest times in your life. And it feels like when you listen to it, it's one of those kind of albums that I feel like when I'm sad would be a great album to listen to have somebody feel sad with me, almost, that person being you. And, compared to some of your earlier albums, which I think of as really fun and dancey, and I saw you at like the Rubble Bucket Dream Picnic, so it was like this all outdoor Holyoke dance party and a block party outside. This one is much sadder and more contemplative, and also includes a short film that I think is brilliant because you should watch this film. Go to Caroline Rose's website and, pay the $5 to watch the film. Because it talks about a breakup and the way that it... Can you explain the first half into the second half of this 14-minute film? And I think it's just a genius way of dealing with the ending of a relationship and how it was filmed and shown on this film.
Yeah, thank you. I made it with a friend of mine who we've been friends since childhood, and I wanted to work with somebody who I was really comfortable with. So it was really like two kids getting together. Like we would be in diapers playing with a ball together. So like it's just fun spitballing ideas back and forth. And the original idea was to make 5 parts about the different stages of grief. I was going through a breakup amid, having just worked my ass off to put out an album that then got its head cut off and and then being in isolation for such a long period of time and having so much to think about during that time. There was a lot of grieving and feeling like I was going crazy. There's something about grief in that way that if you let it start kind of eating away at you, it will really feel like you're going crazy, like you're losing your mind. Because some days it'll feel as though you are moving forward and like, oh, I'm actually fine. And then the next day you'll be like, why did I say that thing? Like everything would have been different if I had just said that one thing differently. So we were trying to capture something that makes you feel a little bit surreal, like you're not quite sure what's real and what's not. And so we ended up, Sam really rolled with this idea and basically had this idea to use a bunch of doubles so that you're thinking about past versions of yourself and future versions of yourself and showing them all in real time. So we had to choreograph the past versions. It gets really complex because there's 3 parts. We ended up like cutting it down from 5 to 3 parts and using 3 songs. And the first song is setting up the stage, so you're looking at the past.
But the way that you set
song-
up the past is starting at the end and going in. The whole first part is in reverse.
It's in reverse, yeah.
And so it's what a way to show the entirety of a relationship by starting at the end and going backwards.
Yeah, it's hard to sum up what's happening in this film because it's a lot packed in 14 minutes.
Yeah. I kept getting like David Lynchy Twin Peaks vibes, especially with all the doppelgangers and the reverse stuff and all that. It was so cool.
But yeah, it starts in reverse and sets up the scenes. I wanted the first part to be in reverse so that you know what the hell's going on. You kind of understand, okay, this is a relationship, there's a breakup, it was emotional, but there's still like a sense of like dissociation or confusion involved. And I think it really sets that up. There's a lot of things that happen after you split with somebody that you really love. There's so much confusion and heartache and anger and frustration and then denial. You know, ultimately, I wanted to try and get the story to a place where you have to see that the only way through it is sitting with the feeling.
This album is also, like Monty was saying, is pretty intimate compared to your last couple of albums. How is the feeling of that going to change when you have an ensemble behind you for 2 nights when you're here?
I mean, I've actually only heard the digital Muzak versions of the arrangements. And even the Muzak versions on the computer, which were made by my bandmate Lena, who's just a brilliant composer. And I kind of let her have carte blanche over the arrangements. And she's done such an incredible job. But listening back to these, I'll get goosebumps just listening to the Muzak version. So I think hearing the octet, it's going to be mind-blowing. I'm going to cry my eyes out. It's going to be so beautiful. Yeah.
I'm psyched.
Yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity 2 nights in a row in Florence, Tuesday and Wednesday, April 2nd and 3rd, to see Caroline Rose and hear some from this new album that's amazing, The Art of Forgetting, with this Metropolis Ensemble.
In similar fashion, like this album is pretty intimate in sound and tone, and in your previous albums, it seemed pretty clear to hear where your influences were coming from. Like Superstar is heavy on the Prince, however accidentally, and before that is a little bit more danceable, a little bit more like 80s danceable, which is super cool. But were there different influences that came to you or that you used and were inspired by to make this particular album?
Yeah, I had a whole list of references that I was listening to. There were a couple things that were really, you can hear them a lot. Like the Bulgarian Women's Television Choir, you can hear that Balkan style singing all over the album. You can hear that Balkan style singing all over the album. And when I had first listened to that album, someone had actually told me about it who used to work at Rough Trade back in the 90s or 80s. And he was one of the people that helped put that album out. But when I first heard that, it came so naturally to me, the way that they were singing. It actually made me think that I have some sort of Balkan ancestry or something. 'Cause it was like a direct link. Like I'm like, oh, I know exactly how to do this. There was no thought put into it at all. It's kind of hard to sing live, though, on a microphone because I'm singing really close and intimate, and then all of a sudden I have to like back so far off the mic because it's extremely loud.
Yeah, we have a lot of guests come into our studio that we wish would do that, but they're not as wise with microphones as you are, Caroline Rose.
Oh, it's actually a bit of a struggle because I have to really take like 5 steps back if I really want to let loose with this style of singing.
Mic control is a skill.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I feel like it ends up sounding a little different performing it live because I will pierce everyone's ears if I like go at the top of my lungs. But it's nice. It was really fun in the studio doing this because, you know, you can really try so many cool things. You can do so many cool things with your voice. And then the other giant influence was this song by this artist, Floating Points. The song is called Falaise. And he basically wrote a string quartet arrangement, had them play it live, and then while they were playing it live, modulated it through a Buchla rack. So he was modulating it in a way that it would chop the audio. It's a form synthesis called granular synthesis, and anybody who's like into modular stuff would find that this sound really obvious. But to me at the time, I was like, what is this? What is this? How did he do this? I must find out. And it captured this feeling of things not being quite right. Like you'll hear something really beautiful, but then it's picked apart. It's almost like a burst. Like some sort of explosion where the really beautiful sound that sounds very familiar to you is all of a sudden shattered into these tiny little bite-sized shards. And it just perfectly captured what I was trying to get across. And so I learned how to do this. I built a little modular rack, and then I actually worked with Sylvanesso, Nick from Sylvanesso, who does a lot of their modular stuff. I had been tracking in their studio, doing some solo tracking, and we had met. And I was telling him, like, oh, I got this little put together this modular box to try and get this technique down. And he's like, oh, I know, you should try this and this and this and this. And I was like, well, why don't we do a session? Let's do stuff together. And so he ended up being on the album, and we were modulating very natural acoustic sounds. So every weird sound that you hear in the album is from the actual audio of just a voice or a guitar or a piano.
That's so cool. I love that. Caroline Rose, thank you so much for taking some time out today. She's at Bombyx, which I think if acoustics are your thing, you're going to love this converted church that's now a performance space. It sounds great in there. Head over to her website to check out her film and find out more about their music, and I can't wait to see you live.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've never been to Bombyx, so this will be a first for me.
Caroline Rose will perform 2 nights at Bombyx in Florence, April 2nd and 3rd. Find tickets at bombyx.live.
Tuesday on the Fabulous 413, we look towards the future of Massachusetts because there was just a report about places becoming ghost towns, and most of those at the top of the list were in Franklin County. So we'll talk with state legislators Joe Comerford, Natalie Blais, and Susanna Whips about their article refuting these findings.
We'll check out the local legacy of the Holyoke St. Patrick's Day Parade with Committee President Haley Dunn, and we'll hear from NEPM's Jill Kaufman about the labor strike at Mass MoCA. Thanks to Richard in Haydenville, Wendy and Nick in Amherst, and Kevin in Greenfield. Only $160 to go this hour. NEPM.org or 800-639-8850. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
Everything to stay the same. Maybe I could tie you up, and if you worked hard enough, you could draw up some love. Baby, how does that sound? You need some air, but I can't let you out. 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 Guess when lost is the same. We're all scared of change. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I could have got the therapy. It was sooner. Let me think about that. Maybe it was you.